Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And through you, Mr. Speaker, I have a couple of questions for the proponent of the bill.
Please proceed, Madam.
The proponent cited a Supreme Court case, Virginia versus Tennessee, which he maintained upheld the right of states to enter into compacts. I'd just like his comments on U.S. Steel versus the Multi-State Tax Commission, in which the Supreme Court found exactly the opposite. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Fox.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, I thank the representative for the question. I will admit I'm not as entirely familiar with the U.S. Steel versus Multi-State Tax Commission case from 1978, but I believe that the essence of that case was that a court would first decide whether the proposed compact constitutes a compact. I believe that that case looked at the essence of the compact. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Cheeseman.
I thank the good proponent for his comments. In fact, in that case, by a 7-2 majority, Justice Powell delivered an opinion that the Multi-State Tax Commission, by virtue of its compact, did in fact violate the compact clause because it impaired the sovereign rights of non-member states. And I think this is a very relevant case because the Multi-State Tax Compact was in many ways almost identical to this National Popular Vote Compact as presented. In 1966, I believe, the Multi-State Tax Compact was drafted, and once 7 states had joined it, was deemed to go into effect. And the reason was to regularize taxation over a number of states, particularly in dealing with corporations that operated across state lines. So in that way, at the point of the lawsuit by U.S. Steel, 21 states had joined the compact. So again, I go back to that Supreme Court opinion, the ruling that because this impaired the sovereign rights of non-member states, this compact, this multi-state tax compact, violated our compact clause. And although I'm not a lawyer, I would presume were non-compact states to enter into a lawsuit objecting to the National Popular Vote Compact, there is strong Supreme Court precedent that would allow this decision to be upheld. I also would have a question for the proponent about how the compact treats who is the winner in cases, as Representative Neal referred, where there is no majority, in fact, simply a plurality. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the representative for the question. The answer, I think, is that the answer is that the winner of the national popular vote is deemed the winner, whether it be by plurality or majority. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Cheeseman.
Thank you. So again, my understanding that plurality in the case of 4 or 5 candidates could be as low as a 30% percentage of the vote. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ultimately, I suppose so. However, my understanding of presidential elections in the past is that it's been very rare that the percentage has been that low for any election having more than 2 candidates. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Cheeseman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I realize we haven't seen percentages that low, but I think we're all agreed we're in a new political environment, and who knows what's going to happen in the future. I'd like to direct a few questions through you, Mr. Speaker, about if the compact addresses the question of recounts and if there is a level set at which a recount would be necessary. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Fox.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, give me 1 second, please. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for the indulgence of the chamber. If a recount if a recount within an individual state were to occur, that would occur pursuant to the laws of that state, and that's why the Electoral College meets in December in order to give those states time to sort out any discrepancies in their electoral results. So the compact itself does not address recounts. The recounts are dictated by state law. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Cheeseman.
Thank you very much. So through you, Mr. Speaker, given that there would be no uniform standard, yet the electoral votes would be allocated based on the majority, it would seem to me that this would be grounds for litigation by the losing candidate, that he or she was not treated equally across all the states in terms of the recount procedure. Would the good proponent agree that might be a possibility? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would say that litigation is a fact of life after any new legislation is passed. So ultimately, any law that's passed either in this chamber or other states or on the congressional level is subject to litigation. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Cheeseman.
Thank you very much. I guess we've got to keep the lawyers employed. I have a question about possible concerns that have been raised about the Popular Vote Compact with respect to the Voting Rights Act, both in terms of dilution of the minority vote and for those states that are required to get approval from the U.S. Attorney General if they alter their election procedures. Through you, Mr. Speaker, does the Popular Vote Compact address those possible impacts on the with regard to the Voting Rights Act? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Fox.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, I'm inclined to ask the representative to, if she can further specify or clarify her question in terms of the Voting Rights Act. My initial reaction is that the underlying compact will simply assign the winner of the national popular vote, will simply assign the Electoral College votes of the states to the winner of the national popular vote. I'm not sure it gets as specific. The language of the compact, I'm not sure if it gets as specific as the proponent is asking, but if she can please clarify or rephrase, it'd be great, helpful. Thank you.
Would you care to clarify, Representative Cheeseman?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, the example which I have here cites Latinos comprise 8% of the voters in the nation, but 28% of the electorate in California, which has more electoral votes than any state. California's impact under the National Popular Vote Compact is reduced, thereby diluting those minority votes. I'm interested if the proponent of the bill finds in the compact itself if it addresses this possible disparate impact. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Fox.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, the actual compact does not specifically address the language that the representative is seeking. I will say that the compact does treat voters in non-member states no differently than voters in member states. All voters in all states will be treated equally under the compact, regardless of whether their state belongs to the compact. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Cheeseman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And through you, Mr. Speaker, again, one of the other parts of the Voting Rights Act where states are still under supervision with regard to changes in districting and other things, they're required to seek permission before adopting any voting qualification or prerequisite or standard practice or procedure with respect to voting. Would this apply to the National Popular Vote Compact? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Fox.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, I thank the representative for the question. The state election laws are dictated by the individual states, and so the actual compact does not, I do not believe, addresses the specific language that the representative is seeking. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, sir. Representative Cheeseman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the proponent for his answers, and now I just have a few comments. It was my great pleasure a few months ago to tour the Houses of Parliament. Despite having lived in London for 12 years, this was the first time I had taken advantage of this, and it was a thrill to be in the Mother of Parliaments, to see the original Speaker's mace, and to know that everything we do here every day is modeled on that great ancient chamber and building and tradition. It is, of course, a very different system. They have a parliamentary system in the United Kingdom. They have elections by law at least every 5 years, but can have them should the ruling party decide they're in power and call a snap election, or if in fact there's a vote of no confidence. One of the things I think is a real plus is the fact that once they do have a national election, they only have 6 weeks to campaign. I think a lot of us would love a 6-week presidential campaign. But in looking in that chamber, in seeing their traditions, and seeing different voting traditions and practices throughout the world, I come back to some comments my good colleague, Representative Labriola, made. We have an amazing system in the United States with consecutive changes of power that are peaceful, that are orderly, that are regular. And I think that is largely due to the system that has been devised. I remember, it was a joke, someone was driving around the former president, and they said, well, you've got a great system, you have former presidents. And they said, what do you mean? Well, in my country, there are no former presidents. You're either president for life or something happens to you. So I think we do have an amazing system that is not to be changed lightly. There is a reason, as has been said before, that amending the Constitution requires great effort. It is not a frivolous matter, yet it has been done successfully 27 times. So if it is deemed appropriate to alter the manner in which we elect our president, let us do it in the way that has been ascribed and prescribed by the Constitution. Therefore, I stand in strong opposition to this bill, and I urge my colleagues to oppose it. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.